Washington Journal continues.
A discussion on the recently concluded Supreme Court term, the key decisions from that, and two guests joining us to talk about it. Joining us in studio is John Malcolm of the Heritage Foundation. He is the vice president of the Institute for Constitutional Government, also served in the Bush administration from 2001 to 2004 as the former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Criminal Division, and Elizabeth Wydra of the Constitutional Accountability Center. She serves as their president. To both of you, thanks for giving us time today.
Of course, great to be with you.
If you look at each term as a chapter, so to speak, of the Supreme Court, Elizabeth Wydra, let's start with you. How would you characterize the chapter that just closed out?
A little scary, concerning. You leave it at the end of the chapter with a little bit of a pit of anxiety in your stomach. And I say that in large part because of, this series of rulings that we got with respect to individual rights, the upholding the ban on gender affirming care in Tennessee, the ruling out of Maryland that allows parents to opt out of books simply including LGBTQ characters in public school. And then, of course, concluding with the, denouement of the terms chapter, the court's decision in the birthright citizenship injunction case, where, in my view, they completely turned their back on longstanding history of equity, which is supposed to provide complete relief, and especially when you're talking about the denial of a fundamental right that is unquestionably protected by the Constitution and more than 150 years of Supreme Court precedent, the right to equal citizenship at birth for all who are born here.
John Malcolm, same question to you. If you take a look at the chapter, how to conclude for you?
Well, I have a different characterization of all of the cases that Elizabeth just mentioned. On the nationwide injunctions case, it reined courts in so that they could fulfill their constitutional duty by dealing with the parties who are in front of them and not overreach to decide cases for non-parties when there's no case or controversy as to them. In terms of the Mahmoud case, that was the case out of Maryland. It gave parents who had religious objections to having their pre-K kids indoctrinated in the current sexual ethos, to give them the ability to opt out. It didn't say that they couldn't teach these things in school, but it gave them the right to opt out their children. I would also note in the nationwide injunctions case that the court did not reach the merits of the constitutionality of birthright citizenship. I forget which the other cases are, but let me say, there was the Skermeti case, which was the ban on highly questionable transgender treatments and surgeries. It upheld the rights of states to have different rules when it comes to medicating minors, and also how medications are used in line with the state's traditional role in terms of regulating medical practice. I would say, actually, there were very, very few cases decided, only 62, and about 40% of them were unanimous, which is really surprising when you consider that the cases that reach the Supreme Court almost invariably get there because there have been a split among some very bright judges in the lower courts. And I would even say that there were unanimous decisions in some of the most controversial decisions of the term, one involving Catholic Charities out of Wisconsin, another involving a suit by Mexico against Smith & Wesson, another involving whether or not majority groups, so straight people or males, have to have a different standard of proof when alleging that they've been discriminated against in terms of their employment, and also the TikTok case. Those were all unanimous decisions.
Elizabeth Wydra, a wide scope of cases, a wide amount of decisions. Mr. Malcolm had brought up the breakdown. What did you see from that in this term?
Yeah, we see usually every term, there are a large number of cases that are unanimous or don't break down across ideological lines. That's something that happens nearly every term. But nonetheless, the cases that are the most high profile, perhaps the ones that touch Americans' lives more deeply on a daily basis, often are those ones that break down along ideological lines, like the birthright citizenship injunction case, last term, of course, the Trump immunity case. And, there were also cases that that John didn't mention that I would bring up the ghost guns case, which is where you can order a kit and assemble a gun. That the regulation put in by the Biden administration to regulate ghost guns was upheld by the Supreme Court. That was a decision that I thought was absolutely correct. But, you know, we see here with this court a very deep division on fundamental questions of the rule of law, the role of the court in a constitutional democracy, and the role of the court in protecting the rights of the vulnerable versus the powerful. There were many business cases, as there always are in this court, and as always is the case, my organization, the Constitutional Accountability Center, does an end-of-term analysis of just how well big business did before the Supreme Court, and we found yet again that the Chamber of Commerce did better than the average litigant. And in fact, it was noted in a dissent by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson that this court frequently seems to open the doors more widely to litigants from the business community than to the everyday folks who try to seek access to justice. So that's another theme that I would add.